if you're not doing it the right way, if you're not putting in the time, if you're not willing to put in the time to kind of serve in those things, what happens is you're like on this like hamster wheel or treadmill or whatever you want to call it of constantly chasing, trying to find new people, because people buy your stuff and they ain't coming back because you didn't serve them well. So they're not going to buy a second time. So you've got to constantly find new people to sell to. And if you're not willing to kind of serve the heck out of them before they buy, you got to get good, really good at the marketing stuff to get people to be willing to buy. And then they get let down. And so they don't come back again. Now, some come back again for a different reason because they don't want to feel like they've thrown money down the tubes. They feel like, oh, well, if I just invest the next thing, I'll make some money. So there is some of that, but not a lot. But ultimately, by serving people both before they buy, even if you don't know that they ever will buy, and then after they bought, and serving the heck out of them and thinking everything about how do I serve my people, it gets easy. Welcome to the Certified Badass Online Marketing Podcast, where being a badass has less to do with what you wear and what music you listen to, and everything to do with whether you've got the thriving online business of your dreams. I'm your renegade thinking Harvard Law grad turned online entrepreneur host, Bobby Klink. In my years building my thriving business, the most important lesson I've learned is that being a badass online marketer isn't about secret strategies or ninja tactics. It's about doing the basic stuff right and showing the F up. So each week here on the show, you'll get clear, easy to execute guidance on how to build your online business and a swift kick in the ass or two to make sure you're getting it done. Hey there. Welcome to episode 191 of the Certified Badass Online Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Klink, and I am excited for today's show. Now, I'm excited for every show because I love getting up. I love doing these podcasts. I love chatting and kind of, telling you guys what I know. But I'm especially excited for today's show for a few different reasons. Number one, we're going to be talking about something that I'm passionate about, something that I believe is an important lesson and an important kind of, maybe it's kind of the kick in the rear that you need, but it's also about, or I should say, and it's not about, I'm also excited because it's the beginning of a series. Now, I've done a couple of short series, like I did a couple of episodes about storytelling, etc. But this is actually going to be an 8-part series. And it's an 8-part series about the topic that I'm calling the Serve First Way. And what it's really about is about kind of approaching entrepreneurship from the right kind of framework, mental mindset, approach, thinking, whatever you want to call it, to truly be a serve first entrepreneur. Now, this 8-part series is not about the tactics, although we'll talk about some things that are tactical and strategic. But we're going to be doing 8 episodes right now in a row. So each Tuesday, starting with this one, that are walking through kind of the mindset of being a serve first entrepreneur. And so that's what we're going to be talking about. This episode is kind of the beginning. I'm calling it an introduction or a call to arms. I don't know what we want to call it, but it's basically setting the stage for what's to come in the next 7 episodes. Before we dive in, though, I do want to talk about, I do want to kind of tell you that this episode is brought to you by Badass Online Marketing University, which is my 100% free training site. Now, you might be saying 100% free, but what's the catch, Bobby? In fact, I have people who are in it, people who are in my community who send it to friends, and like, I signed up, but what's the catch here? There is no catch. There is no upsell. There is no, funneling you into anything. This is a 100% free training portal. Right now, as I'm recording this, there's a single course in there, Online Marketing Foundations, which walks you through kind of how to apply the fundamental principles of marketing to building an online business. Because I think that's what's missing a lot in a lot of what we're being taught. So that's the course that's in there now, Online Marketing Foundations. But we are expanding this into a true university that will have a course catalog. Now, I have set a goal internally to have 13 courses in there by the end of the year. And we're working on an online legal foundations course, because I'm the legal guy still. But then we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of marketing. Things like a messaging course, a copywriting course, a list building course, a course about how to create how to create courses, how to beta launch, how to write a sales page, how to do email marketing, how to do content marketing, how to tell stories, and a lot more. So we're going to have a lot of courses in there. It's going to be growing with time, and it's going to become your one-stop shop for learning the things about online marketing. So you don't have to suffer from death by 1,000 courses, which I know a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with. So you can sign up absolutely free by heading over to bobbyklink.com/bombu. That's BOMU, bobbyklink.com/bombu. Now, with that, I want to dive in to today's episode. And I want to talk for a bit about why I'm passionate about this idea of talking about serve first. It's something that kind of when I think about my business, when I think about a lot of the things that are kind of happening around me and how I'm different, it's something that just is. I mean, it is who I am. And when I look back over a lot of the different things that have kind of happened in my development as a marketer, going back to when people were noticing that I was doing things in a different way a couple of years ago, now 2.5 years ago, or 2 years ago, I guess, I don't remember how long, part of really what that comes down to is that people were picking up on the fact that I was doing things differently. I was serving, I was giving, I was not looking at entrepreneurship through a standard way, at least in the online space. And my business is here because of that. My business is where it is because I have taken the serve first way. And I want to be clear. This is not something that I'm perfect at. There are still things that I'm working on, kind of like meditation. This is a practice. It's something that every day of your life you kind of have to be thinking about and you have to be working on, et cetera. And, just like, everything else, you will have slip ups. I have slip ups, but I'm constantly thinking about this. And really, this concept isn't a new one. The idea of being a serve-first entrepreneur really isn't new at all. Now, in the online space, I hear a lot of people talking about being a serve-first entrepreneur, and we're usually using that almost in a sense of kind of differentiating ourselves from, from the people who are the Lamborghini and private jet crowd. And so that's kind of what we tend to do is we try to say we're different than them. We're serve first or we're heart centered, or people use these phrases that are trying to say we're different. But what we're going to talk about today is that in reality, most people aren't living up to the serve first entrepreneurship tag. And we're going to talk about why that is. But before we get into that, I want to kind of talk about the basic concept behind it. And one of the stories that I tell people all the time is the story of my dad. And if you don't know, my dad ran a chain of drugstores, and it's a crazy story because his dad had started this drugstore business, and my dad got out of college in, the second half of the 1960s. And then before my dad even turned 30, he bought my grandfather out. Now, my dad is a pharmacist by training, but my dad and two of his brothers bought out my grandfather and bought this business. It was just called Klink's. And when I say pharmacy, I mean, it was a pharmacy, but way more than a pharmacy. It was had electronics. It had a lot of cosmetics and makeup and a big toy section. It had a lot of different stuff. So it was like a pharmacy, but also a very nice kind of store. And when my dad bought it, it had one store. By the time, he sold out, or not sold out, he sold the company, sold the business at some point. I guess it was in the late 90s, right at the end of the 90s or early 2000, around then, when it was clear my brother and I and my cousins didn't want to go into the business. And so he and my uncle sold. But at its peak, I think he had 13 or 14 stores. I don't know the total number, but it was a lot. And so he built this business. And I'll never forget, my dad is kind of in a lot of ways a crotchety guy, and he kind of always has been and can be grumpy and can be very gruff, but he's always had this view that the customer comes first. And the first story that I always tell people to help them understand this is his office was upstairs from the main store downtown, the one that was kind of the flagship store for the business. And he had a big old wooden desk, like one of those big, huge wooden desks that, you kind of think of that I don't even want to imagine trying to move it because it must weigh a ton. It must weigh, I don't know, hundreds of pounds because it's one of those desks. And then it's got like a custom shaped top and then literally a piece of glass cut to sit exactly on that top. And so it is one of those big things. And he had 2 guest chairs, and he didn't have customers in his office. He had, he would have employees, he would have people like that come to his office, but he didn't have customers in his office. So his office wasn't set up for customers. It was set up more for employees, for managers, for the people who were an important part of his business. And I'll never forget, I don't remember a lot about his office, but one of the things I do is the sign that was facing you when you were sitting in his guest chairs. It was a sign that was sitting under the glass, and it said the 2 rules of business. Rule number 1, the customer is always right. Rule number 2, if the customer is ever wrong, refer back to rule number 1. And it's kind of a cheeky way of saying the customer's always right. And I want to be clear. If you've been in business for any length of time, you know that the customer is not always right. Customers will do ridiculous things sometimes, but the point of the sign, the point of this idea very much is that your customer is the center of your business, that shaping your business around treating your customers right, about serving your customers, about doing all those things is the path to success. And so it's funny when I think back because growing up, I never wanted to be a business guy. I didn't want to have a business. I didn't want to run a business. I didn't think so. I wanted to be a professional. I went to be a lawyer. I wasn't thinking this. But as it turns out, my dad was rubbing off on me. And so kind of that serve first approach has just been natural to me, that I would naturally think that the customer's always right. But it's not just me. There are many people who've pointed out that your revenue, that your income, and this is whether you have a business or whether you're working for someone else or anything else, your revenue is a function of how many people you serve and how well you serve them. Literally, how many people do you serve and how well do you serve them? In fact, in my favorite book, The Go-Giver, this is called the law of compensation. They lay this out as kind of one of the 5 laws. And it's this very central idea, and it makes sense, right? If I serve 1,000 people and I serve them very well and they get some value, it makes sense. Well, and let me be clear about something else. This is also just basic economics. At the end of the day, what an economic transaction comes down to is I'm going to provide value to people who buy from me, and they're going to get more value, or hopefully, and over the long term, this will prove true. For individuals, it may not, but over the long term, for all your customers, it will. Your customers will get more value from what they buy from you than what they paid for it, right? Because they wouldn't be willing to pay $1,000 for something that they would only get $900 worth of value from. Now, we could make this very clear in the context of money. You would never go buy a 50-cent piece for $1, right? Because you'd be losing money. So what happens is people, and the very notion of business is that I can provide value to you and you're willing to pay me for that value. And we kind of have this way of figuring out how much it is, but it comes down to how many people do I serve and how well do I serve them? Which means there's kind of 2 ways that you can increase your income, that you can increase your revenue. Number 1, you could serve more people, right? So you could find ways to serve more people. Second is you could ask yourself, how could I serve my people better? How could I add more value to what I'm doing? But again, notice in each case, the question is centered around service. Now, I want to be clear. There will be bubbles. There always are. There always are chances and situations where people make money irrationally. And those bubbles come and they're fads and people look at it and say, oh, I need to get in that. But then it pops. There's the famous case. The original kind of bubble in economics was like a tulip bubble in I don't remember where. I think it was the Netherlands. But it was like literally like the price of tulip bulbs like shot up to an irrational number and then it came crashing down. But it happens all over the place. So I want to be clear. Sometimes you can game economics, but over the course of history, businesses make money based on how many people they serve and how well they serve them. And what that means is like, let me kind of break that down so that you have it. When you're first starting out, you might be able to charge people more than the value of your service because people haven't quite figured out the value of your service. You might even irrationally get a bunch of people to buy for a while, but eventually that's going to dry up. Eventually, your ability to charge, your ability to make money will depend on how many people you're serving and how well you are serving them. That's why being a serve first entrepreneur just makes sense. The more that I serve, the more that I will make. And what that means is the more people I serve, but also the better I serve them. And I want to be clear, serve first, even built into the name, has some presuppositions. It's not just that you put service like first in priority, but it's also that you serve them first. And what that means is I don't worry that I'm serving people who haven't bought from me. I do that all the time. The more people I serve and the better I serve them, the more I'll make. When I serve people who haven't bought from me, I'm making an investment in a relationship. And quite honestly, I'm just getting joy out of serving those people. But those types of investments are the reason that those people become brand advocates. They may never buy from me. I have people who have never bought anything significantly from me, but have been critical in helping me make money because I invested in them by serving them. And as a result, they have become a brand advocate. They have sent people my way. People have bought from me, etc. So each one of those investments works out. And when you truly are a serve first entrepreneur and you get a reputation for being a serve first entrepreneur, everything gets easy. See, everything gets easy because you get a reputation and like your prior buyers and your prior people in your community and people who are still in your community who haven't bought become brand advocates, start sending people your way. But just as importantly, it's easy to like find people who want to be an affiliate and send people your way for a referral because they know you're going to treat their people right. And all of a sudden you get all of this kind of just general goodwill. So that you're not having to chase new buyers all the time. You're not having to spend money on advertising, et cetera. And I've talked about this many times. My legal stuff, my $1,000 Online Genius template library product, 60% of those sales come from people, they land on my page and they buy. They're not in a funnel. They didn't come through an affiliate. We can't track where they came from except that they heard about me. They know about me. Because of my reputation, because I serve, because I have this reputation as a serve first entrepreneur. And again, people don't call me a serve first entrepreneur, but because I've done it, I've built this goodwill. And so they come to my page and they buy. That's the power of doing this the right way. Now, if you're not doing it the right way, if you're not putting in the time, if you're not willing to put in the time to kind of serve and those things, what happens is you're like on this like hamster wheel or treadmill or whatever you want to call it of constantly chasing, trying to find new people because people buy your stuff and they ain't coming back because you didn't serve them well. So they're not going to buy a second time. So you've got to constantly find new people to sell to. And if you're not willing to kind of serve the heck out of them before they buy, you got to get good, really good at the marketing stuff to get people to be willing to buy. And then they get let down. And so they don't come back again. Now, some come back again for a different reason, because they don't want to feel like they've thrown money down the tubes. They feel like, oh, well, if I just invest the next thing, I'll make some money. So there is some of that, but not a lot. But ultimately, by serving people both before they buy, even if you don't know that they ever will buy, and then after they bought, and serving the heck out of them and thinking everything about how do I serve my people, it gets easy. So that's the pitch for why you want to do this. And again, just to be clear, this is not new. This is not something that should come as a surprise to you. But what I want you to get is the problem is that too many people are thinking of this as a tactic. In other words, they're thinking, well, I have to have a serve first. Like I got to give them something first so then they'll buy from me. And literally it's a transactional approach. And we're going to talk about that in a future episode. But that's not the way it does. It kind of like I say about giving, serve first can't be a slogan. It can't be a tactic. It can't be a strategy. It has to be who you are. It has to be the way you approach everything, because it's in that magic or kind of in that change of who you are that the magic happens, because that's when people see, holy crap, this person is genuine. And it's interesting. Someone like, someone recently said this, was talking to some of my customers and said, one of the common themes that came up is they said that I'm a person of integrity. And I heard that and I said, a person of integrity? Well, I think most people are. And when I listened to that and kind of, like teased out the strings, what they meant by that was exactly this thing, that I am a person who serves. I'm a person who does these things. That is what they were seeing as the integrity, that I'm willing to tell people, no, don't buy now. That my view is not how do I make more money. My view is how do I serve my people better? And because of that, it comes across as I am invested in them like other people aren't. And again, it's this common theme when I think back to what people were noticing about me and about my business a couple of years ago. That's what it was. When they said, how do you find a way to like connect with people on the internet? Like you just have this way to build these connections that is different. And I said, yeah. And yes, I do. But it's because I'm just trying to serve people. And when you're doing that, it's easy to connect with people, because I'm not interacting with people thinking, how do I make money? I'm interacting with people saying, how do I help them? And guess what? When you do that, people want to connect with you. It's kind of pretty simple. So that's kind of the pitch for it. But now we're gonna talk about something. It's going to be a touchy subject. And what I'm going to tell you is, if you don't have thick skin, if you're someone who can't like hear something and it maybe is about something you're doing, because I'm not going to talk about anybody in particular, but I'm going to be talking about some things that you're probably doing as an entrepreneur. And I'm going to explain that those are not serve first, that those are not the actions of a serve first entrepreneur. And so if that's going to bother you, I'm going to suggest you go ahead and tune out now, or not. I mean, you probably should listen, but you need to be willing to be coachable, to hear this and say, and be willing to ask some questions about it. So what I want to talk about now is kind of this concept that a lot of online entrepreneurs would say that they are serve first entrepreneurs, and they believe they are serve first entrepreneurs. I don't believe that any of this is like people lying and saying, oh, I'm serve first, when they in their hearts are saying, I don't care about serving my people. No. But here's the important thing. Saying you are a serve first entrepreneur is irrelevant. Your words here don't matter. What matters are your actions. I mean, that's just the reality. That's the reality of everything. And so the question is, are your actions in line with being a serve first entrepreneur? And again, I want to be clear. I'm not casting aspersions here. I'm not throwing stones, because I struggle with some of these things too. And let me ask kind of a starting question is, when you're looking at a business decision, is your first question about profits or about people? Is your first question, how will I make more money? Or is your first question, how can I serve my people better? Now, I'm simply going to tell you that I have no problem with making money. I make a good living. I have no problem with selling. I sell a lot. But I'll simply tell you that if your reflexive question that you ask yourself is, how do I make more money? Or how will this affect revenue? If that's the first question you ask, instead of asking the question about people, it's an indicator that serving doesn't come first, that profits, that revenue come first. And again, I'm simply stating that because it's the reality. Ultimately, the shift to become a serve first entrepreneur is to instead ask the question, how do I serve my audience? Does this serve my audience? Now, I'm not saying you can ignore making money, right? Because we can't be in the business of serving our audience if we're not making a living. But if the first question is about money and about profits, then your first priority probably isn't in service. And I simply want to point out that we all have to do that. And I want to be clear. I'm not perfect here. I think about things and do it. But the difference is I'm often now, I've kind of trained myself and I say, how could I serve my audience better? I come up with an idea and then I'm like, can I make it work from a financial standpoint? Can I do this? Can I figure out a way? Because once I've figured out that service thing, like I will work, and it doesn't always work, but I will really want to find a way to serve my people better. And so when you come at it from that frame point, you come from that frame of reference or that viewpoint, you will kind of get creative in how you're thinking about what you can do. Because you'll try to be creative and say, can I find a way to make this work? Can I find a way to serve my people? And so that's kind of, the first level question. Now, the next issue that I want to talk about is, this is where people are going to kind of get mad at me. A lot of the tactics that we use in the online marketing space are signs that we are not serve first entrepreneurs. And I'm trying my best to get these out of my thing. And I'll just tell you, even though I've been doing this work for, a year now, we've been trying to make, kind of fully shift out of this. There's still remnants of it, but we're still doing it. I mean, we're still trying to find those things and ferret them out. But it's not, I can't even identify all of them. But what I can tell you is that if you're using manufactured urgency to get people to buy, that is not a serve first tactic. That is not about serving your audience. It just isn't. Serving your audience is about having the right offer in front of your people at the right time for them, not for you. So using manufactured urgency tactics, let's be honest, that's about making more sales. And there's a couple of different ways, that I can think of that we do this. One of them is with one-time upsells. And we had these for a while. And literally my team and I just recently said, why are we doing this? It's like we had this thing, if you went through this one funnel, there was a way that you could get a discount that did things. But we said, that doesn't make sense. That's not serving people. Now, again, I know that these products will serve my people over the long run, but at the same time, when you use one of these one-time upsells where you give them a big discount on something, what you're doing is trying to create FOMO. You're trying to create this fear of missing out so they feel like I've got to buy it. Even though it may not be right for me. I'm not sure if it's right. I don't even know if I'm going to need it, but man, I better buy it because this is such a good deal. That is not serving your audience. It's just not. I'm sorry. Now, if you had a product that literally everyone would need 100% of the time without exception, and that everyone is ready for 100% of the time without exception, maybe there's an exception, but I'm just going to tell you, you don't have that product. No one does. And so trying to force people to buy with a one-time upsell and the FOMO involved in it is not about serving your audience. That is about making more money. Similarly, and I'm not going to spend a bunch of time ranting and raving about this. If you've listened to me for any length of time, you know that I think the open closed cart model, you can call it the launch model, but any notion that you can only buy my products for this limited period of time, for the most part, is not a serve first model. That's about creating FOMO, about creating kind of a fake urgency for people so they feel like they have to do it, and getting a bunch of people to sign up in spite of the fact that they may or may not ever need it. And I have seen too many examples where people buy these things out of FOMO and never use them because they decide they didn't want that tactic, they didn't want that strategy, etc. And so, they bought because of FOMO and that didn't serve them. What it did was serve the bottom line of the person selling the product. Again, I'm simply going to say that. That's a reality. Now, there are some exceptions. Doing an open and closed cart where you need people in a cohort, where people need to be going through things together, etc. Yes, but it's the exception, not the rule. And again, people should be thinking twice and should be thinking critically about whether they're going to use those tactics. But again, if you're using that model, that is not about serve first. Now, some of the kind of the other groups of things are in our messaging. And we might put them, and again, we could go into lots of tactics because there are plenty of tactics people use that are not about serving their audience. That's for sure. But what I would talk about is unrealistic messaging that comes up. And it tends to be in the sense of minimizing challenges or objections. So we get good at busting objections, at seeing questions from people as an objection and finding a way to bust that objection so that they will buy. And it's about making it seem like, yeah, you can do this even if. I mean, in my space of working with online entrepreneurs, and I see other people serving online entrepreneurs, this will work even if you don't have a following or an email list. Anytime I hear that, I'm like, unless this is a course about finding a following or building an email list, no, it won't. Now, coaching and all those things are different, right? Because you're going to help them with that. But I'm simply saying, if you're selling a course about how to create a product and then sell it, and you're telling people this is going to work even if you don't have a following, I call BS. It won't. So anyone who does that, I mean, that is not about serving the audience. That's about getting more people to buy. And are there exceptions? Are there people who come into these programs with no list and no following and still make it work? Of course there are, but they are few and far between. But it's not just that. It's all kinds of challenges, like minimizing people's obligations or people's challenges to try to convince them that they should buy. Again, not serve first. It simply isn't. I mean, those kinds of tactics where you're trying to make it seem like, oh, it doesn't matter if. Even if you don't have access to this, even if you don't have this, et cetera, it's not going to be a problem. Those kind of responses are not about serving your audience. Now, another thing I would say is there are people who will use guilt. And this happens in a lot of contexts. There are people who will do it in like sales calls. They try to get you locked in advance by trying to make you commit that you'll do some things and they try to make you feel guilty. And look, we have to agitate pain. There's nothing wrong with agitating pain and pointing out the pain points that your people are suffering from. But I'm simply going to say that we've gone overboard on this. There's too much of this. Well, if you don't buy now, you're going to be in the same place 6 months from now. That's just not true. It's just not. I mean, there's a very good chance that they might need to do some other things first. And maybe they ought to be doing those things instead of buying our product. And this was the thing I'll never forget. I started in this program. It was like a program on how to sell people high ticket programs. And I was trying to do this and they wanted me to like try to convince people to take out loans, to go apply for new credit cards, to buy legal stuff, even though they had a business that had not even started yet. I refused. I was like, you guys have a lot of things you need to do before you deal with the legal stuff. You got to make sure you got a product, you got an idea, you got all this stuff before you spend thousands of dollars for this. But a lot of people won't do that. And it comes up in various ways. And so we have to think through, just asking ourselves this question on, are we pushing too hard? And again, this is like one, I can't say that every time you're agitating pain that you're doing this. What I'm saying is you have to think through, am I doing this to truly serve my audience? Will this actually serve my audience? Or am I doing this because it's going to make more people buy regardless of whether they're ready or not? So we have to ask that question. But then another thing that we do is we set unrealistic timelines. Now, some of this is like, I'll help you build a business in 30 days or there's that kind of stuff. Or other unrealistic expectations and timelines. I'll simply say this. There's been this trend and I'm simply going to say it like, if you believe that your average customer is going to need 6 months of support from you or 6 months to truly get their results, and you're going to give them support for 3 months, I ask my question, why? Why? Why not the full 6 months of support if you believe that's what most people will need to get results? And again, maybe there's a good explanation. Maybe there's a reason why. But I would simply ask, and again, this is something that struck me, if I believe that my product is something that's going to take X amount of time for most people to get results from, and that they're really going to need support the whole time, the serve first way is to give them that support, to price that into the product. And that's my approach. I mean, you don't have to adopt it, but I'm simply saying if you're not taking that approach, I would simply ask you to ask yourself the question, is that about serving your audience, or is that about making more money so that you can maybe sell them support on an ongoing basis? Nothing wrong with selling. I got no problem with that. But let's not say that that's a serve first tactic if that's what we're doing. So all of these tactics we've talked about are about making money, but here's the thing. We human beings, I like to say we're irrational, but in this case, we are really great at rationalizing these away. And I don't think people are doing this. No, let me back up. People aren't rationalizing it away, thinking they're rationalizing it away. What's happening is cognitive dissonance. We want to think, I'm a serve first entrepreneur. Oh yeah, I care about my people. And at the same time, we have this, but I want to make money, right? So we have these two different pieces going on, and we have to figure out, well, how do we make them fit together? And so what we do is we rationalize the decisions we make, and we come up with reasons why making money now is the way to go. And I'm not talking about, like, there is a basic thing. We have to make money, right? And so I have to make money. I have to be able to do those things to build a business. There's no question about that. But we come up with these rules and these things we convince ourselves. Like the first one, you've probably heard this: selling is serving. And I agree. Selling can be one of the best ways to serve. But it's not because you're selling that you're serving. Selling is only serving if you're selling people something they need at that time. If you're using tactics that are based on FOMO, that are based on getting them to buy things when they're not ready, or getting them to buy it based on false expectations, that is not serving. It's not. I don't care how many times you repeat, selling is serving, selling is serving, selling is serving. If I sell you a piece of junk you don't need, or if I sell you something that's great, but you can't afford and you don't need right now, that's not serving you. Selling is only serving when you choose to do selling in a serve first approach. So we need to stop with this notion of selling a service as just a rote answer, because it's not always service. Again, I go back to that, we can use extreme examples. If I would have tried to get people to go out and take out loans to apply for new credit cards so they could buy a high ticket program about legal stuff that they did not need right now, that wouldn't be serving in any way, shape, or form. But we also say things like there's magic kind of in the transaction, that somehow getting people to buy is the key to unlocking success for them. And we convince ourselves, well, people don't take action unless they've got skin in the game. I'm here to say that's just BS. I mean, I have a lot of people who've gotten free things from me, who got a scholarship and didn't pay anything into one of my programs, who've taken massive action. So this, I could walk through why people believe this and how we find these things, but what I'll tell you is it's a causation correlation problem. Now, people who aren't going to take action are less likely to buy. But there are plenty of people who will take action who don't buy for one reason or another. And giving them an opportunity is the same thing, and helping them and serving them, they'll still take action. I know plenty of people who are action takers. And separate from that this concept that people need to have skin in the game to take action, I'll simply say this: buying isn't going to magically remove other obstacles they have. It's not going to magically give them an email list. It's not going to magically give them a following. In fact, it may actually hurt them, because all of a sudden the money that they could have been using on ads to build their audience, they just gave to you. Yeah. Like, I counseled someone out of joining my coaching program because I said, I think you ought to spend the money you'd be spending on me to build your audience on Facebook ads or something else. Yeah, that's selling as a service. That's me talking people out of this thing, because I recognize that money, as much as I believe in an abundance, the reality is there are limits to how much money people have available. And we have to make decisions based upon that money. And it's not about hoarding it, but it's about figuring out, what should I spend it on? And oftentimes, getting people to buy our products isn't just about them, not getting value out of our products, but it takes money out of their pockets that they should be spending on something else. That is not serving. And there's no way you can rationalize that away. And then another thing we do, and this is kind of the cognitive dissonance, is we talk about our case studies, right? We talk about our success stories. And we should do this. We should celebrate the people who've had breakthrough success. But a lot of times I think we do that and ignore the other people. We don't ask ourselves, are most people getting success, or is it the exception, not the rule? And I want to be clear. I'm not saying that you have to take ownership for people's success. You don't. I can't make you successful. I can't make anyone successful. So I can't own that. But what I'm going to say is, if you have a lot of people who aren't succeeding, I think you need to ask some questions about why that is. Is it because you had a bunch of people buy who should not have bought because they weren't ready, because you used tactics that were about creating FOMO to get people to buy, regardless of whether they're ready? If so, then yes, their failure is on you. Sorry, not sorry. I'm going to say that, and you can't talk me out of it. Now, if you have a product that's available all the time, you put no pressure on people and they come and buy, different story. But if you choose to use a tactic where you say, well, you only have once a year to buy my product during this 2-week period, and I will support you for this limited period of time, and that's it. And then people get all, excited about what's happening and excited about the energy of the thing, and they buy in spite of the fact they're not ready because you tell them, well, this will work even if. And then they can't get the success they need. They don't actually have the things in place to actually really get started with your product. And then your support goes away before they are ready. Yeah, it's on you. Their failure is on you. And I know that's something that's going to piss a lot of people off that I would say that. But I believe it. Now, I can't control success and failure. I can't control what people do once they buy my product, but I can control the tactics that I use. And if I choose to use tactics that are going to result in that happening, yeah, I'm responsible at that point. So that's kind of my talk about it. And what I want to say is I'm not saying that there's any one tactic. Now, there are some tactics you can't use. I'm not going to sit here and talk a lot about strategies. Ultimately, being a serve-first entrepreneur, and we're going to talk about a lot of shifts over the next 7 weeks, and some are shifts maybe for you, some of them aren't, but it's going to be this over that, or this instead of that. For example, next week's episode is passion over profits. But ultimately, there's really kind of one shift, and all the things we're going to be talking about are about this. They're about kind of shifting our mindset in different ways, but it's about asking ourselves a different question. Instead of asking ourselves first about profits or anything else, we come at everything through the lens of, does this serve my audience? Yes or no? If the answer is no, if it doesn't disserve them, if it doesn't affect them one way or the other, we might do it or not based on what we need to do. But if it doesn't serve our audience, if it hurts our audience, wow, we're going to be really careful about doing that. And again, this is a broad question, like I said, and it has a lot of wiggle room because, like I said, you got to make money. You got to make a living. I can't give away bomb you. I can't create all this training and do all these things and have a team that's going to help me do all that unless I'm making money in my business, right? So I've got to make money to be able to serve people. But I'm simply saying, if you come at everything from the question of how can I best serve my audience, if that's your starting point, if that's where you kind of are coming at, you're always going to be thinking these things through. And like I said, you will never be perfect. I'm not perfect. We still have some stuff that we're trying to kind of root out of the business that is just deeply ingrained. But when I make decisions now, my question is about you. It's about my audience, about how can I make this experience better? How can I serve you better? And then I try to figure out a way to do it. I can't always figure it out. I got to be honest with you. There have been things I've wanted to do that I couldn't figure out how to make it work. But we invest in technology to make the experience of people better. We invest in doing things in a different way. We do all of that because it's the answer to the question, how do I serve you better? And I do that very simply because I'm not thinking about how am I going to make my profits in 2021. I'm thinking about where is the business going to be in 2031, in 2041, in 2051. Yeah, I'm thinking decades. I'm not thinking short term. And that's one of the things we'll talk about. But when I think about it that way, I know that the best way for me to build this business is to figure out how to serve more people and how to serve them better. And if I do that, the profits will follow, the money will follow. I don't have to worry about the other stuff. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about for the next 7 weeks is how do you, what are some of the different specific switches you need to make in mindset and thinking, et cetera. So we're going to do that, just so you know. Then we're going to have a break for about a month of episodes. And then after that, we're going to do a whole nother series about the nitty gritty, about how to market and sell in a serve first way, like in a very kind of granular level, talking about what you need to be doing, et cetera. We're going to have a whole series of episodes about that too. Because serve first is my calling. It's what I'm called to help people to do. And so I'm going to help you do it. So that's it for this episode. Between now and next week, what I'd suggest is give some thought to these questions of, are you asking yourself questions? Are you thinking about things through the lens of service or through the lens of making money? And then ask what kind of entrepreneur you really want to be. And, I'm hoping that your answer is going to be that you want to be a serve first entrepreneur and that you make that decision. And so that you come around to that and we go from there. But I'll see you again next week. And next week, we're going to be talking about passion over profits. That's it for this episode of the Certified Badass Online Marketing Podcast. Make sure to tune in next time. And in the meantime, go out and build the badass business of your dreams.